Lane Kiffin said something at his press conference that will send alarm bells at every Ole Miss opponent this year. Yes, it is that good.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast around. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. On today's show, we're talking about the offensive line and tight end injuries that happened in Kent and how they're in the front of the mind of Lane Kiffin as he looks toward one of his biggest goals of 2025, making the Ole Miss run game better. The Ole Miss O-line is starting to get a little healthier, but the tight end room still remains a little bit of question. We'll kind of talk through that a little bit. That could be the key of how this offense develops. We'll also dive into why Ole Miss needs to be close to a finished product, even though we know it's all tough to get there that early this year, but Ole Miss must start quicker. But first, we start about Lane Kiffin lighting up when he talked about the Ole Miss defensive line and why they have a real shot to match last year's elite unit per Lane Kiffin. We'll explain all of that and more right here, right now on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the insiders and everydayers who make this show what it is, and that is the most fun way to follow Ole Miss sports. So do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, comment on the video, subscribe to the podcast on the audio podcatchers, and give it a 5-star review as well. It costs nothing, but helps keep all of this free. If you want a little bit more, you can join the Insiders program at the subtext link down below. No trolls, 14-day free trial, and the easiest ever way to cancel. So give it a try. And don't forget to check out a second listen on the network. Nearly every team, college or pro, including Locked On SEC and Chris Gordy, or Locked On Vandy and Corey Burton, they're there and ready for you. So full disclosure time, I created a masterpiece of a podcast. It was fantastic. We're going to try and recreate it a little bit after we get done, but it was amazing. It would have gotten 5,000 views tomorrow. It was so good. And then I put it in there to edit it, and it sounded like Alvin and the Chipmunks. And so I'm having to re-record it and trying to gather all of my thoughts over. So if this seems a little bit rushed, a little bit scatterbrained, I apologize for that. So we start out with Lane Kiffin at his weekly presser, set up for the Georgia State Panthers. The first meeting ever between Ole Miss and Georgia State will be Saturday night on the SEC Network at 6:45 Central. Tom Hart, Cole Kubick, Jordan Rogers, all of those guys will be in town for SEC Saturday night, but that'll be the first game. Lane Kiffin, though, at his weekly press conference, said something that should get everybody's attention. It is pretty big time because everybody assumed after Ole Miss had Princely Amamiel and Walter Nolan, Jared Ivey, and J.J. Pegues graduate, that it was going to be difficult to replicate that after that. You were going to take a step back, right? Well, Lane Kiffin in his press conference today said, not so fast, my friends. I think this defensive line has a chance to be just as elite as last year. Think about that for a second. You had 4 players go to the NFL, and all of a sudden the head coach of that team is like, hey, this unit has a chance to be just as good. This unit has a chance to be just as dominant. This unit has a chance to be elite. That should send shivers down the spine of everybody that is playing Ole Miss this season. Because last year was a best in the century level kind of yards per carry season for Ole Miss football against the run. If this defensive line is that good, if Ole Miss can replicate that, this is a playoff team. You have to remember, Lane Kiffin and the Ole Miss offense, they are the top offense over the last 5 years in college football, averaging over 500 yards a game. They are going to figure it out. The problem with this Ole Miss team when there's a problem happens on the defensive end. But when you look at what they have built on the defensive side of the ball, and credit goes to Pete Golding for what he is doing. They're doing a phenomenal job in the transfer portal, finding players that fit what they do. I always talk about how they only have one rating for recruiting rankings, but that's not really the way that this works. That works for clicks and that works for stuff like that. But a player that is an A-back at Navy would struggle playing an I formation running back, and that player would also struggle playing a spread running back. Basically, a 5-star player can fit in the most systems, but after that, even 4 and 3-star, it is very system dependent. Pete Golding does a fantastic job of finding players that fit what he likes to do. And he is a genius at scheming up the linebackers and the ends to make explosive plays. He is absolutely one of the best to ever do it when it comes to scheming that up. And this defensive line, the best part about this to me is it's homegrown. For years, I mean, Deuce Gerald's talking to him, he wanted to see if Ole Miss played high school players. Well, Ole Miss is going to start at strong side in Cam Franklin, a former number 1 player of the year in the state of Mississippi. He is going to be next to Zxavian Hasz, who is having an all-SEC level camp this year, getting ready for the Georgia State game. He is going to be a problem. He's like 6'8", 340 pounds. Everybody used to say when Terrence Cody was at Alabama, calling him Mount Cody. No, Mount Harris is more of a mountain of a person. William Eccles at the 3 technique, having a really good camp to the point where he may even be a little bit ahead of Jam Brown. But at the 3 technique position, there's a lot of good football players there. And then there's Suntarine Perkins, a former player of the year in the state of Mississippi as well. 3 number 1 Mississippi players on the defensive line. And then you add in a Deshaun Womack. Then you add in a Prince Will Amon Mielen. And all of a sudden, you have a really good defensive line unit that has a chance to be sudden. Pete Golding talks about players that having heavy hands and the way they strike and the way they play with physicality. This defensive line has a chance to be really good. And if Lane Kiffin, before the season starts, just flat out says this offensive line has a chance to get there, it is very reminiscent of last season. It's like this team has a chance to be really elite. Now, they still have to do it. They still have to make the plays that are in front of them. They still have to do all of the stuff that is required of a defensive line in the system against Southeastern Conference people that are scheming to take advantage of them. They still have to handle all of that. But this unit has a chance to do what many people thought was not thinkable 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. And that was this defensive line is not going to take a step back. Pete Golding's all in on them. Lane Kiffin's in on them. Probably time that the Ole Miss fan base joins them in getting in on it as well. Hopefully, none of this sounds like a chipmunk, and we'll see exactly what happens. Okay. After the Georgia State game, you have 2 SEC games. And after that, it'll be a quarter of your SEC slate. Arkansas and Kentucky, that will be in the books. And that means that Ole Miss has to be sharper after Georgia State than they were at the same point last year against Furman. With all of the roster turnover this offseason, the real question is, can this team come together faster, look more complete earlier? We break all of that down, how possible that is, and why it matters for the Rebels' 2025 run right after this. You know, August 26th is officially FanDuel Futures Day, a brand new holiday for football fans who live for bold predictions and preseason hunches. For just 24 hours, FanDuel is giving you deals on all NFL season predictions. So whether you're calling your MVP, eyeing a long shot division winner, or ready to crown your Super Bowl champion before week 1 even kicks off, this is your moment. that's music to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast ears. That's kind of our thing. So take a flyer on the MVP race. I really think Jaden Daniels putting up massive numbers. This is going to be his year for the Washington Commanders. Crown your Super Bowl champion in August. I like Buffalo here. I do not know why. Maybe it's Hard Knocks and all of that, but I like Josh Allen, and I think this year might be the year. Or you can parlay your division winner dark horses. Hello, New Orleans. Hello, Miami. Let's see how that looks as well. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. We have an important request. Locked On wants to hear from you. We've put together a survey to learn more about our listeners and make your favorite podcast like this one even better. This is your chance to tell us what you like, what you don't, and answer questions about advertising. Go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey to get started. Everyone who completes a survey will be entered for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Amazon gift cards. Again, that's lockedonpodcast/survey. You can also find the link in the show notes down below. Thanks again for helping us out. It's weird to think about, but Ole Miss probably needs to be more of a finished product after the Georgia State game than they were a year ago, whenever they had Jaxson Dart and Walter Nolan and all those upperclassmen. You need to be further along in September this time than you were last year. Last year, there was 4 preseason games. I think it was Furman, Middle Tennessee, Georgia Southern, and then Wake Forest, who immediately canceled next year because we don't even play the same sport as them. And in that game against Wake Forest, you didn't really see us playing the same sport as them. But it is what it is. Ole Miss needs to be a finished product, or more of a finished product, because football is an evolutionary game. And it goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. And it's all about ebbs and flows. So you're never a finished product. Whenever you come close, you end up with the last 3 or 4 games of the 2008 season. That's what that can look like. But Ole Miss opens up against Georgia State, which isn't Furman like an FCS team a year ago. Georgia State beat Vanderbilt a year ago. Georgia State has gone into Rocky Top in Tennessee and beat them as well. Ole Miss is a 38-ish point favorite in that game. And coming out of it, you have Kentucky. You have Arkansas. 2 games that can get weird, and 2 games that you have to look at a different way because of what happened a year ago. For starters, Kentucky is a team that beat you a year ago. So you're going to probably put a decent amount of effort into that game because you got beat a year ago. Then you have Arkansas, who is definitely going to be coming into Vaught-Hemingway Stadium with a fair amount of vinegar in their system, ready for a fight. You put 63 points on them in Fayetteville, and it could have been a lot more. Let's just say that they are going to be ready for that game, especially with the transfers like Jalen Braxton and Patrick Kudus and Luke Hasz, those players in Oxford. That game probably takes on a little bit of added meaning. Then you have Tulane, who is probably one of the better G5 teams in all of the country. And for good measure, in September, you have LSU. That is why after this Georgia State game, you have to be fairly close, so that when you take that game 1 to game 2 jump, you kind of take a big jump. And I think that Ole Miss can do that. I think that Austin Simmons can do that. Lane Kiffin at his press conference today said that Austin doesn't need to be chasing stats. He just needs to be executing the offense. And if you do that, you're going to be in pretty good shape. And the way they do progressions and all of that is just a little bit different. But Jaxson Dart and Austin Simmons, they are different style quarterbacks at heart. They run the same offense, essentially, but it's going to look completely different. If Austin is just Austin, Ole Miss has a chance to be pretty good. I want to see how the offensive line looks, and we'll talk more about the offensive line and the tight end in the next segment. But as it sits right now, I am curious to see if Ole Miss is going to be able to run the ball and how they do it. I talked with Dalen Flowers, and I talked with Brian Smith, the Florida football scout, the Locked On recruiting expert. Trinidad Chambliss and Austin Simmons in the backfield at the same time feels like something that they might do eventually. It feels like there's some creativity there with what goes on, especially with the running ability of Chambliss. Damian Taylor has been the goal line back for a good bit of spring camp or fall camp. Damian Taylor is probably the number 2 running back right now behind Keywan Lacey and ahead of Logan Diggs. Take that for what it's worth. But this running back room, very thoughtfully put together with the way and the styles of those running backs so that you don't have a situation like Henry Parrish and eventually Ulysses Bentley last year. This is very thoughtfully put together in the running back room, and they're hoping potentially for 2020, 2021, 2022 type situation in the running back room. But it's going to be on that offensive line to handle what's going on. And we're going to talk about the injuries in the O-line room and in the tight end room in the next segment. With Lane Kiffin wanting to run the ball more, those injuries and all that become pretty paramount to what's going on. But this football team needs to be a finished product after the Georgia State game. Now, not finished product is what I'm saying, but it needs to be pretty well put together. You shouldn't be growing in week 6 anymore. You're in the fire. You're ready to be serious. There's no room for mistake because the reality of it is Ole Miss fans want to make the playoff. They do. And if they say they don't, they're lying to you. They do. But to get to the playoffs, it will require probably a 6-0 record for Ole Miss this season going into Athens. If you are 6-0 going into Athens, all of a sudden we start having a completely different conversation. Because at that point, if you're 6-0 going into Athens, you only have to go 4-2 the remainder of the week. Now, the Georgia game going to be really tough. At Oklahoma, going to be a really tough game as well. And then you have South Carolina and Florida. I don't know exactly what that looked like. But on the other side, you have Mississippi State and the Citadel. So as long as you handle what was going on, and last year they lost games as double-digit favorites, I'm quite aware of that. But the way it's situated, Ole Miss can make a run, but they need to be 6-0 at the turn after Washington State. And that requires them to be much more ahead of the game following Georgia State than to be just trying to figure stuff out. This Georgia State game is a pretty important game because of what comes after it. It gets real in a hurry. At Kentucky, Arkansas at home, Tulane at home, LSU at home, Washington State comes to town, at Georgia, at Oklahoma, at South Carolina at home. So we'll see exactly what that looks like. I'm pretty fired up about where Ole Miss can be, but they need to be 6-0 going to that Georgia game. You have to be on your P's and Q's and ahead of the game after this Georgia State game. That is going to be massively important. Austin Simmons needs to be ahead of where we expect him to be. There needs to be a running back. I want to see Ole Miss running the ball on 3rd and 3 and getting first downs when the other team knows it's coming. That's what I want to see, especially against a Georgia State. If that happens, Ole Miss is going to be absolutely fine. So we'll see exactly how that goes as well. In our final segment, Lane Kiffin admitted one of his main goals, improving the run game. It's been set back a bit by injuries to the offensive line and tight end, but the offensive line starting to get a little bit healthy. So where does Ole Miss stand right now, and just how good can this team be? We'll break all of that down next. Guys, you probably heard of Viagra or Cialis, or maybe even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rougiette Ready. Rougiette Ready is a next generation prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rougiette's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, kicks in fast, on average in about 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment hits you right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rougiette might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. I love that it's completely online. Rougiette connects you with a board-certified doctor and ships your treatment discreetly to your door. You can even read real customer reviews on their site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. Head to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege and use the code lockedoncollege, all one word, for 15% off. That's RUGIET.com/lockedoncollege and use the promo code lockedoncollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with a prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but they're not FDA approved and they do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, and manufacturing review. Please visit the Rougiette website for full safety information. Lane Kiffin mentioned one of his main goals going into the 2025 season, and that was to improve the run game. We talk all the time about how thoughtfully they put together the running back room and how they are different styles. It's not a situation like it was a year ago where a lot of players were the same way. This is 3 or 4 completely different styles for Ole Miss in the running back room right now. But one of the problems they had this fall camp was the fact that the offensive line room in the middle of camp got a little bit banged up. The tight end room got a little bit banged up and is a little bit banged up right now. But the way it is situated, 4 out of the top 5 offensive linemen that were predicted to be starters going into the season, they're available. They took part in the mock game. They're full go. They're going to play. PJ Wilkins coming back from injury gives you that left guard that you've been looking for. So the 5 on the offensive line will be Diego Pounds, PJ Wilkins, Bryson Sanders, Patrick Kutas, and of course, Jaden Williams. So the offensive line is kind of getting to where it needs to be. We're still waiting to see about Delano Townsend. We're still waiting to see about Terez Davis. And right now there's a bunch of young guys that's in the 2 deep on the offensive line, including Devin Harper, Connor Halls, and of course, John Wayne Oliver. So that's what the offensive line looks like right now. It's getting there to where it needs to be, to where the starters are on the field. Now, at tight end, a little bit trickier. You still have Daquan Wright, who is the starting tight end, and he would have been the starting tight end regardless. He was going to be the starter, whatever happened. But Luke Hasz got injured. And he is somebody that I have heard they're shooting for about the LSU week for him to come back. Now, that same person said that TJ Banks, they were shooting for the Kentucky week, and it looks like TJ Banks is going to play against Georgia State. So Luke Hasz could absolutely come back a little bit quicker than that, but that is what I've been told. And the other one is Caleb Odom, who there's rumors about what the exact injury is. Nobody knows for sure, but about a week and a half ago, my person said, hey, Caleb Odom went down in practice. And I was like, okay, just make a mental note of that. And he didn't come back for the next scrimmage. He didn't come back for the mock game. So he's been out for a little bit. So he obviously got rolled up on pretty good. We'll see what happens with Caleb Odom and when he hits the field. he could end up on the playing field Saturday for all we know. The staff does not talk about injuries at all. But those players aren't necessarily effective to the run game. I like Trace Bruckler moving up. He was buried on the depth chart. This has allowed him to kind of move up to the second tight end. There's a lot of usage for him. He's a true hand in the dirt type tight end, and Daquan Wright is a flex guy. So they can do a lot of the same stuff this year that they did last year with the setup and the makeup of these two players. Lane Kiffin wants to run the ball, but it is still at the point. It's getting better. It's getting a lot better. It is still at the point where you're worried about the offensive line and you're worried about the tight end room blocking for Kewan Lacey or Damian Taylor or Logan Diggs or Dominique Thomas, whoever's back there. You need people blocking down the field. And if that can happen, they can be very, very good. I like the way this running back room has been set up. I like the way that these blockers have been set up in the offensive line and the tight end, but it needs to all come together. If it does, they have a chance to do pretty special stuff because there's some very talented players in this rotation that we're talking about pretty consistently. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves on offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we are the front door of Ole Miss. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. It helps the show, and it's totally free. Your support means the world to us. For your second listen, check out the Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes around college football's landscape. Find the Portal on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. I apologize about the trivia. I told you about the Alvin and the Chipmunk stuff. The day just kind of got away with us. So bear with us on that. We'll have trivia coming back tomorrow. Hotty toddy, everybody. Remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you later.